All right, we'll go ahead and get started. We have Lewis Bridges and Brenda Patterson in the room with us, and Lori Woods online and Grant online as my backup person. He's going to help me with some questions and stuff if I get stumped. Since this is my first time teaching tests and quizzes, I ask for your grace. If there's something that stumps me, I'll research it later and get back to you. But we're just really going to go over the basics on how to create an assessment. There's two different ways we can do that within Connect. So let's go ahead and go to Connect. Yeah, if you open up a browser and you type in connect.trevecca.edu, and then you log in with your username and password. Then you'll pick a class. I mean, you can pick any class that you're currently working with or that you've worked with in the past. You can always delete these sample assessments later. Right now I'm in my playground, so if you have a playground already built, you can go ahead and get into that. And if not, and you want a playground, just send me an email, sraymond@Trevecca, and we'll create a playground for you so that for things like this, you can go in and get your hands on stuff and not worry about messing up your class. Are you getting there, Lewis?
I'm getting on there. No, I never looked for
We're going to get Lewis into Connect so he can follow along with us.
But I'll let him know.
No, you're right. I think you're right there. There you go. Yeah, that's where you can log in. Yep. All right. So once we have one of our classes pulled up, on the left-hand side, you can see an option that says Tests and Quizzes. If you click on that, it will take you into the screen where you can create an assessment. There's two different ways that you can create a test or a quiz or any type of assessment you want to give. And you see the two radio buttons here where those are the two different types. The first type is the assessment builder. That's kind of like a wizard where it takes you in and you can create a quiz question by question. And then the second option is create using markup text. That's a really fancy way of saying you can create your quiz outside of Connect in a Word document or a Notepad document, and then you can copy and paste into the markup text option. And sometimes that's a better way, because if you have a 30-question exam, you're not going to want to build the questions one by one. You're going to want to build it in Word or Notepad and then just copy and paste into something else. So it gives you that option here, which is nice. So that's the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to act as if I'm going to give a 10-question exam, but I don't want to create the questions one by one. So here's my sample test. I've created this in Word. You won't see this on your screen because I created this earlier. But if you had created your own, this is kind of what it would look like. And so you have the question here and then the 4 answer options. And I created this in Word, so it has some formatting here. Connect doesn't like formatting. It needs to be very specific formatting. So the first thing I want to do is kind of take away all of this formatting. And the easiest way that we've found to take away that formatting is to copy and paste it into a notepad document. So I'm going to copy these first 10 questions, and I'm going to paste it into a notepad document. When I do that, the notepad program, which is available on all your computers, it strips out all of that formatting that Word puts in sometimes. Here's a tip for you if you're going to be doing this a lot. Go ahead and create your tests in Notepad. And that seems a little, weird because we're used to working with Word a lot. But if you go ahead and create it in Notepad, then it's ready to copy and paste into Connect. But there are some specific formatting options that Connect has to have in order to recognize this document as a quiz. And the first thing is that we have to assign the questions a point value. In order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter here to give that a single space underneath the number. And in parentheses, I'm going to give it a point value, 1 point. So that's telling Connect that I want this question number 1, to be worth 1 point. And you can have it be worth 5 points, 10 points, however many points each question. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste that next to each number. And that's going to tell Connect every single question is going to be worth 1 point. And once you create this template on the very first quiz you ever do in order to copy and paste into Connect, then all you have to do is come into this document and change the questions, change the answer options, and save it as a quiz number 2. And then that way you don't have to redo all of these point values and formatting and stuff. So if you're a planner like I am, I like to plan ahead. So I've assigned a point value to each question, but the next thing I need to do is tell Connect what is the difference between a question and an answer. And the way to tell Connect that, here, let me grab. The way to tell Connect that is at the end of your question, you put a double space. So I'm going to hit enter. So now you see a double space between the question and the answer options. That tells Connect, okay, I'm separating this question between the answer options. And then I also put a double space between the last answer option and the next question. So that separates the answers by themselves. So I'm going to do that for each question. Some of them are already done. All right. The next thing we need to do is tell Connect what are the correct answers. Because right now it's just going to see all of those answers as the same thing. It's not going to know which one's correct. In order to do that, we have to put an asterisk before the correct answer option. So I'm going to go back and look at my Word document, make sure I get the correct answers. So number 1 is C. So right before the letter C, I'm going to put an asterisk. Just one. Yep. I'm going to do that for all the questions. All right. Once I've done all my formatting in Notepad, that's the last step. So now I have this really simple quiz. It knows the difference between question and answers and which one is the correct answer. A little trick here is to click somewhere in the Notepad just to make sure that you have the Notepad selected. And if you hit on a PC, it's Control-A. That selects everything within that document. The other option is to go up to Edit and say Select All, which I've already selected, so it's grayed out. Once you've selected everything, you can right-click and click Copy, or Control-C, copies everything. And now that's in the clipboard in this, ethereal space somewhere on the computer. And we're going to use it here in a minute, but I went ahead and copied it. Now I'm going to go back to my Connect course, and I'm going to create an assessment using that markup text option, because that's the option where I can paste in my quiz. I'm going to give it a title. I'm just going to say, oops, if I can spell, sample markup test. Now there's some different options you can choose on the assessment type. You can select formative assessment, problem set, quiz, survey, test, or timed test. The most frequently used is either a quiz or a timed test. Usually I use timed tests because professors want, a time limit, 20 minutes to take this exam, or 12 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and click timed test. And I'm going to say create. And it tells me, one tip about Connect that will help you along the way is to read everything on the screen. And I know it sounds simple, but sometimes it's the little things that kind of can help guide you. So it tells me here, create assessment or question pool, step 1 of 2. So I know there's another step coming up. But then it gives me directions. Use the text boxes below to modify the name, which is optional, to provide a description, and then enter the question and answers in the bottom text box. And it says, it is important to follow the correct formatting for each type of question. Examples can be found at the bottom of this page. So when I scroll down, you can see instructions and examples. So this happens to be a multiple choice quiz. But there are other types of quizzes that you can give, or other types of questions. You can give true-false, and it tells you exactly how the true-false questions should be formatted. Here's the same exact example, except it's a true-false. So if it's a number 5, it's worth 7 points. There's the statement, the sky is blue. The correct answer has an asterisk next to it. And same thing with multiple choice. It gives you the same exact formatting that I just showed we did in Notepad. So it's very helpful that Connect gives all these little tips, but if you're in a hurry and you don't really pay attention to what the screen is actually saying, it actually really helps. So I've already copied that to my clipboard, and now I'm going to paste it in here. And I'm just going to kind of review it, make sure that it has all the correct formatting. And I'm going to click Next. Once I do that, I can see this is step 2 of 2. And it tells me verify all of your questions appear below with the correct question types. So what I do is I look at the point value and I see, okay, well, it's recognizing each question is worth 1 point. Oh, I don't know what happened here. What happened here? How did I not format that correctly? Well, Connect is pretty specific. I have a space in between my parentheses and my number 1. So it's not recognizing that's even a question. It populates all the other information. So I'm going to go back here, and what question was that? Number 3. I'm going to take that space out. I'm going to copy it again. You can go back. Down here at the bottom, I can go back so I can edit it again. I'm going to paste it in here. I'm going to try that one more time. And now it populates the correct point value for that question. And then I always verify my answers when I paste it in here. I mean, it's probably 99.9% always going to be what you told it to be. But, you know, I always look at it from a student view too. I want to make sure that I'm selecting the correct answer that they have to fill out. So I go back to my Word document and I make sure that everything matches.
So can you have more than one correct response to the question, or maybe not just one?
You can have more than one correct response, and it depends on the settings, which we'll look at here in a minute. There's some different settings you can select. The Create Question Pool option is a more advanced feature that if we have time at the end, I can go back over, but we're going to skip that for now. So I'm just going to click Create Assessment. When I did that, so sample markup test, that's what I just created. Right now, you can see 2 tabs in my test area. First tab is, I can't highlight that. First tab is working copies, and the second tab is published copies. So I can go ahead at the beginning of the semester and create all of my quizzes for the entire term. And I don't have to publish them until I'm ready for them to either be taken or for the students to see that they're available to be taken.
But I could go ahead and publish them early, but just put
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
Can't see it.
Exactly. So, right, we'll go over that now. So, actually, I want to show you real quick before we get out of this screen what the other assessment builder looks like instead of the markup text, just so you can see what it looks like. So I'm going to say sample builder test. And I'm going to click on that radio button, and I'm going to say timed test and say create. This window looks a little bit different. It's not the full body content that you can copy and paste. This is asking you, okay, let's add a question one by one. So I can select my question type, multiple choice, and it's kind of the same concept, only it's guiding you along the way. So it's saying, do you want a single correct answer? You can do multiple correct with a single selection or multiple correct with a multiple selection. So here's where your question text would be. And if I show hide the rich text editor, if I show that, it'll populate like any other discussion board or anything else in Connect that this looks very familiar. You can format your question in different ways, bold or italicize, or however you want to edit your question to make it look. You can add attachments, which is a nice feature. If for some reason on that particular question you wanted them to refer to an article to help them answer that question, you can add that attachment here. So when they log on and they see that question, they also see, you know, please view this attachment. They click on that and it opens the article for them to read over, and then they can go back to the question to answer it. That may not be a good idea on a timed test, but it's there. So I'm going to go ahead and populate my 4 answer options. Doing it one by one would take a lot of time. It might make sense if you're doing like a 5-question pop quiz or something. And then over to the left, you can see that you can select which one is the correct answer. And on this one, it's C. You can remove answer options. You can even format your answer options to look more spiffy. You can add additional answers. You can randomize answers, which is a nice feature too. If you have a lot of students taking the same pop quiz and you don't want them looking over and cheating at each other's screens, you can randomize the answers so that it's not C for everybody. It could be B for somebody else. Yeah. You can require rationale, so it gives a little text box under why they selected that answer, and they have to say, I think it's this because of this, or whatever their rationale is. Add to question pool and assign to part are some advanced features that I'll go over if we have time. Correct and incorrect answer feedback. So correct answer. These two are optional. You don't have to fill these out, but if they give the correct answer, you could have some feedback here saying, great job, or, thank you for reading over chapter 2 so diligently, or whatever you want to say if they get the correct answer. The incorrect answer is probably more helpful. If they get the incorrect answer, you can say, please review chapter 2. This was found in, section 1. So I'm going to go ahead and just save that answer, or save that question. That populated one question. So I can, just keep adding questions, which you can see that would probably take a while. If I go back to assessments, now I can see sample builder test and sample markup test. Any questions so far on how to create exams? Lori, you doing okay?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks.
Great. All right, so let's go into the settings of the actual exam itself. Over here, there's a lot of different actions you can do to the particular exam that you're working with. Edit means that you can go back and you can edit your questions again. Preview, you can preview what your exam looks like. If it's a timed exam, you won't be able to preview with timing, but you can preview what the questions look like, what the student would see. Print, of course, is a nice feature. Settings is the most important one because that's how we set everything up. And then we'll go over the others in a minute. So let's click on settings. And we're going to go over all of these tabs. And I'll try to be faster. So assessment type information, that's what you've already created the assessment with. So the timed test and this description that we could have put on at the beginning. Assessment introduction, this is kind of nice if you want to give more specific instructions on what this test is over or what it's for. Delivery dates, a very important tab. So you can go ahead and create this test. You can go ahead and publish this test, and it won't even be viewable to students until you give it an available date. So they won't even see it within their options until whatever date we put in here. So I'm going to tell it, tomorrow afternoon. It goes ahead and populates with the exact time of when you selected that day, but you can change this time. So I can change it to 8. a.m. The due date is also very important. So this test will be open until the due date, and then it will close. So I'm going to go ahead and put Monday at 2:30 is fine. And then the retract date is usually when the due date happens. But if you want to leave this exam within the student's view, and they've already taken it, it's already been submitted, but you still want to leave it there so that they can go back and refer to questions or whatever, you can select the retract date to be a week after the due date. So then it disappears from their view a week after the due date. But usually we put it at the same time as the due date. And it kind of states that here. If you've given feedback, that feedback will still be viewable until the retract date, things like that. Assessment release to, if you have multiple courses that you want to tie this exam to, you can do that here. High security is a feature where if you want to open this exam for a particular student because you know that they're going to need more time, you can turn on this feature and assign a username and password and then just pass that information on to the student. And then they'll be able to log into the exam itself using that information and take that exam with more days to be able to take that exam. It's not really a feature we use very often, but it's nice to have it. Timed assessment. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a 20-minute time limit. 20 minutes for 10 questions. That's pretty generous.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right. Assessment organization. So if you just kind of review what's on the screen, navigation, that's kind of how they're navigating through the exam. The first option is linear. So that's, they answer a question and go to the next question. They have no ability to go back to the previous question. It just keeps going next until they're finished with the exam. Random access to questions from a table of contents. There are next and previous buttons on each page for navigation, and then they can go back to the beginning where they see all the questions. So I'm just going to keep it at linear, where there's no table of contents, and there are only next questions or next buttons going forward. Question layout. Each question is on a separate web page, or each part is on a separate web page. So if we created, say for example, a final exam, and we have different parts of that final exam. The first part is chapter 1, the second part chapter 2, and so on. We can put each part on a separate web page with all the questions from that part on its own page. Or you can put the entire exam on a single web page. The most common option is each question on a separate web page. And then the numbering, for each part, you can give it a different number. Mark for review. This is kind of nice for the student. If they're, and it's not available in linear access, but if they were on random access, then when the student is taking the exam, you've probably seen this before. They're going through the exam and they're not sure about a particular question. They can hit a button that says mark for review, and then when they're finished with the whole exam, they can go back to those ones that they marked and answer those. I know that when I was taking some CLEP tests, that was a really nice feature.
Question.
Yes.
Back on the backup one. Can when you say restart the number for each part, on the original test, do I have to say part 1, part 2, How's it gonna know
Not
when we stop?
not unless you're creating parts.
Right, but if I'm having order, maybe this part's multiple choice, the next section is true and false.
Mhm.
So do I, on my original test, when I say part 1, multiple choice, part 2, then it recognizes that?
Yes. Yep. You can do restart numbering for each part, so it'd always be part 1, part 1, part 1, or it will be a continuous part 1, 2, 3. Yep. All right. Submissions. The number of submissions allowed, so you can select that they can just submit it however many times they want, or only one submission allowed. Our recommendation is to actually allow 2 submissions because you never know, when a technology glitch is going to happen. They're more than likely using their own computer to take the test. You don't know what type of updates or not updates they have on their computers that it might crash in the middle of their exam. And it does happen. We review, when we get an email about, hey, I couldn't submit this test, we review those on a case-by-case basis and ask the professor if we are allowed to allow that student to have a retake. But it does happen. So you can't trust technology all the time, right? And then late handling, late submissions will not be accepted after the due date, or late submissions will be accepted after the due date. So that's when the retract date is past the due date and it's still on their screen. They can still submit the exam, and then you can allow late submissions to be taken or not taken. So if they're not taken, an error will pop up and say, sorry, this is a late submission, it will not be accepted.
So in order to accept the late one, it has to be on the retract date? Is that, I'm saying, is that where I'm putting it? Where if Johnny had to miss, he still has an opportunity to still take the test online if I'm putting the retract date?
If you put the retract date after the due date,
Right.
So that it's still available on their screen. Yep. Submission message. This is anything you want to say to them after they take the exam. Like, finally, you're done, or whatever you want to say. Or if you want to refer them to a web page somewhere for more information. Feedback is kind of nice for the student because, that tells them what they got right, what they got wrong, what they need to improve on. So you can do question level feedback or selection level feedback, or both. To be honest, I don't really know what the difference is there. Maybe Grant can pop in if he's listening and explain the difference if he knows, but or he can come out. So do you know on feedback authoring what the difference is between question level feedback and selection level feedback?
I don't off the top of my
Yeah, I'm
head.
not sure what that would be.
Well, question level, off the top of my head, question level to me is feedback on that specific question. So if they, got something incorrect or whatever, or you were grading it and handing it back, giving them feedback on each specific question. Since there are, you can break them into sections of a course. I'm wondering if, my brain. Selection level, so I guess you can give feedback per
When they
possible
select it?
answer.
Okay.
So if there were, A through D, if you wanted to, I guess, on each selection, actually put a piece of feedback on there about maybe why that's wrong.
Yeah,
I'm assuming. So
that makes
Yeah.
sense. So yeah, if they're going through the test and they select something, it might pop up with the feedback on there.
right.
or when they're done with the question, the feedback will pop up.
Right. And it's not, it's just overall in the question because the selection seems like it's specific to each possible answer.
Right.
Like they would all have their own feedback.
So there's many different options in Connect, and until you start using them, you know,
Right.
it may not make sense for your particular situation, but feedback delivery, it defaults to no feedback will be displayed to the student. I always default to feedback on submission so that when they submit the exam, they get a page that says, here's what you got right, here's what you got wrong, so that they can always go back and review those questions later. Or you can select only release students' assessment scores. Or you can select feedback will be displayed to the student on a specific date. So if you are in a situation where you want that retract date a week later than the due date, you may not want the submission feedback to be available until the retract date, so that they don't tell all their friends what the right answers are, which they're not supposed to do anyways. And then you can select the student response, what you're going to actually release to them as feedback. And then there's other feedback options within the exam itself. Grading is another important part. This automatically ties it to a selection in the gradebook. So we're going to go over gradebook in the next hour, but you can go ahead and select grades sent to gradebook, and it's going to automatically create that type. It's not called type, topic, maybe. It's called something in the gradebook. Not category, but
yeah.
Grant's drawing a blank too. I got to look over my notes for that.
It might be category. The way it showed it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it creates automatically creates that category and assigns a score to it as soon as they submit the exam. It'll show up in their gradebook. And then you can record the highest score or the last score. So if you open that up to 2 times of a submission, you can just record the highest score or the latest score that they submit. Graphics and metadata, that's background color, background image. If you want your exam to look different, and then metadata, not really, I don't think that has any bearing on what we need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save Settings and Publish. And it tells you exactly what you selected. So it says, you know, this test is available on to the entire class. It is due this date, the time limit. It'll be submitted when the time is up. Students can submit 1 time. Highest score will be recorded, and they get feedback on submission. So one thing to note is, you may already know this, if it is due on 11/10 at 2:34, well, at 2:33, that exam will close. If the student is taking it or starting to take it at 2:33, the system knows you don't have 20 minutes to take this test, so it won't allow the student to take it. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Publish. Right, and then you can see my test down here, sample markup test. Good. Any questions over all of those settings? I know it's a lot. All right, once it's published and activated for the students to take and they start submitting their exams, you can always go in as the instructor and see who submitted the exam, how well they're doing, you know, things like that. The way to do that is to come back to your tests and quizzes, come back to published copies, and you can see your exam. You can see that it's active. If it's past the due date, then it will become inactive. And then you'll see if anybody's currently taking the exam in progress, and then submitted. So how many people submitted that exam? And when I click on, and I know it's like kind of a hard thing, it's easy to miss, but you can click on that number right there. So if you have, say, 25 students in your class, you might see a number here of 23. You know that 23 people submitted that exam. So if you click on that number, it'll bring you to a screen where you can see what their scores were, when they submitted the exam, how long it took them, things like that. It defaults to the total scores tab. So that's total scores on that particular exam for each student, and it'll list all the students down here. Submission status is the first tab. It's also very important because this tells you, and if I would have said that they could take it 2 times and not 1 time submission, it will have a little option right here that says retake with a question mark that you can click on and allow that student to retake the exam. So that's how we allow.
Take it before retract date.
Yes. Or you can, if it's past the retract date and you feel like they need to retake, you can go back into the settings and change the retract date. Yeah.
And that changes it for all students, not just that 2%. You know what I'm saying?
It changes the retract date for all students, but not all students are allowed a retake until you click that option for each student to allow a retake. So they'll see it in their view again, but they can't click on it to take it. They've already submitted it. You have to open up that option of allow retake for those particular students that you want. Yep. All right. And then the questions tab here is, where you can go back in and see their answers and see what they took and what they got right and what they got wrong. You can see question 1, question 2, question 3, 4, 5. Grant only got 1 right out of 10. That's pretty bad. Don't tell him I said that.
We'll get it you know.
I'm talking about your exam that you took for me.
I wasn't reading.
Right, right.
I probably got 0 on that test.
Statistics is kind of nice because you can kind of see the overall scores for your entire class. So you can see trends here. If like 2 or 3 students are saying, I don't think that question was a fair question. Well, you can go back in here to statistics and see, well, only those 3 students got it wrong. 25 others got it right. So it must be a fair question. Or 27 of them got it wrong, so it must not be a fair question. And then you can adjust their score if you so desire. Item analysis also gives a full picture, just in one screen, of right, wrong, the number of answers, percentages. And then you can always export your exam with the answers, which is kind of a nice feature for reporting or whatever you need to do. Here's where you give an adjustment on this total scores screen. If you wanted to give them extra credit, or say if they didn't take the exam and it's way past the retract date and you don't feel like giving them a retake, you just put a 0 right here in the adjustment and it'll show up as a 0 in the gradebook. All right. That's all the basic features of creating exams and quizzes in Connect. Are there any questions or frustrations or
Frustrations? No.
good? Good. Are you being sarcastic?
Yes. No, it's okay. I think I'm okay. I think I have the general hang of it.
Good. Maybe next time I'll be able to go faster and we can go over question pools, which is a nice feature to have, because you can create all your exams all semester long, or even at the beginning of the semester, and you can be adding them to a question pool the whole time. And then at the end of the semester, you can create your final exam, and all you have to do is pull questions from your pool. And you can give them different parts. So that's really nice to be able to do. That way you don't have to recreate your final exam.
Well, I'm checking out because I've got to go to another meeting. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm glad you joined us.
I'll see you again.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.